straight out the gutter. We want everything. Joining us today, I am so very excited and honored to have one of the premier voices and writers for the Celtics. I don't think I know anyone more locked in to the pulse of the team than this woman. She's formerly with SB. She is with SB Nation. She announced yesterday that she'll be doing a really exciting new gig with the Connecticut Sun. So welcoming to the show, none other, it's Noah, and I hope I'm saying the last name correctly, Noah Dalzell.
Perfect, you nailed it.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much today for joining us. The first thing I want to ask you right off the bat is, you worked in the climate change industry to begin with. How'd you get into then basketball writing?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And actually, I still do. So I'm still actually
nice.
a hobbyist while also covering the team. So it's definitely a busy year. But I got involved. So just for some context, I've played basketball my whole life. I grew up in a family where I oftentimes joke, feel like basketball was as close to a religion as we had. My dad played professional basketball overseas for like 15 years. And so
wow.
It was always kind of an integral part of my life. And I was a very serious Celtics fan from a very young age. And I mean, ran a Celtics website when I was 11 years old where I would update the standings manually for no good reason.
Amazing. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So I always loved it. I studied, I did a lot of sports journalism in high school. Actually, I ran our school paper on the sports section, wrote a lot about
Brookline High?
Yes, Brookline High. And then when I got to college, journalism kind of took a back seat. I took some journalism classes, but I didn't think that I could make a real career out of it. I didn't think that it was something that I could do full time. And so got involved in what I do full time, which is climate lobbying, which is a very fulfilling, amazing career as well.
Sure.
And then over this past summer, I'd been a long time reader of Celtics blog, saw that they were hiring, and I applied for a writing position, and didn't really realize at the beginning that meant that I would be able to attend practices and shoot-arounds and games and kind of all that came with it. I think initially viewed it as a little bit more of a limited writing position.
Sure.
But yeah, it has ended up being a really amazing experience. And so this is my first year covering the team. Probably can't think of a better first year to cover a basketball team, but it's been a lot of fun.
It's almost kind of like a pinch thing. Like, okay, you're doing the climate job, which you love, obviously. Now you got the basketball gig. Like, doesn't get too much better than this. I mean, I suppose maybe playing in the NBA and WNBA maybe, but like that's pretty awesome. I'm quite envious, and I really admire that path that you've taken. So you said you were a player. What position did you play, and who would you say your game was most comparable to?
Ooh, that's a great question, and I ask people that question all the time, so I should have a good answer. I'm a shooting guard. I still play for fun now.
Sure.
I'm a shooting guard. I would say at my best. It's tough because I want to say I want to name one of these good shooters.
Yeah.
But I'm just not that consistent of a shooter compared to these guys. But
on your best days, what?
Yeah, maybe on my best days, like a Duncan Robinson.
Nice.
Like an evolved Duncan Robinson, because I feel like I'm not just a catch and shoot three-point shooter, or like a Sam Hauser, but they're absolute snipers. Like I never was able to be that consistent. If I was, I probably would have played at a higher level.
Sure.
But I'm thinking about like in high school, like my best games, it was like 7 3-pointers, and like that's pretty much all I did. Like I didn't, I never put the ball on the floor. I was often I'm 5'10", so I'm pretty tall, but I never played down low in the post or anything. So someone like a Hauser who just kind of knows his game, plays within that.
So basically you were your Duncan Robinson of the past years before he learned how to kind of take it to the hole.
Yeah, but I did drive sometimes. That's why I'm like, I don't want to
Sam Hauser. You don't want to limit. Yes, we don't want to limit you. That's very, very cool. Very cool.
Along those two, yes, I would say.
So growing up, you obviously are a big Celtics fan. What did you have any favorite Celtics players growing up?
Yeah, so Rondo was my favorite growing up. I have nothing to do with his game.
And you weren't at the game yesterday?
I know. And actually, we share. I'm at almost all the games, but I wasn't at the game yesterday. I also had my championship for my basketball league, which we lost.
Nice.
Oh
Nice.
no.
Consolation prize. At least I was able to do that and then tune in for the second half.
Oh, right on.
But Rondo, I do hope to meet him at some point. I've missed him like 3 times now, where he's been around the facility like exactly when I'm not there.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he's been one of mine. Isaiah Thomas, when I in high school, going into college, he was just. I mean, I feel the same way that most Bostonians feel about him. Such an electric basketball player. So I always like point guards. Like I just, I always found them to be very exciting, and just the way that they, especially like back in the day where point guards were a little bit more conventional, like a Rondo type point guard.
Sure.
And then most recently, I was a huge Marcus Smart fan. Yeah, I just loved the hustle, energy they played with. I mean, we have a really incredible Celtics team to follow right now. So you can't. I think it's hard to look back at any trade and say that it was a mistake. But from like an emotional standpoint, I thought he was just such an electric player. And I saw he got ejected last night in a game that he didn't even play in.
He didn't play? I know, that was awesome.
In overtime.
Right.
I mean,
essential, right?
the hardest part about, I guess, seeing him traded for me was he embodied kind of the heart and soul of the city of Boston. The way,
sure.
It was just all hustle and just, defense, doing all the dirty work. He wasn't all flash. Yes, I agree. And he was one of my favorites as well. You said your dad played overseas. Where did your dad play?
Yeah, he played in Israel for like 16 years.
Oh, wow.
One of the all-time 3-point shooters there. So he's actually a very good shooter. Really, I tried my best, but
so you got that DNA, you got the shooter's DNA.
I got the love for shooting. Like I think my dad and I have spent hours at the park just like getting shots up over the years. But I don't think I ever nailed the fundamentals down. I mean, he has like a textbook shot, and still does.
Sure.
But yeah, he played there for a long time. He's he's originally American, but kind of went over there. And then he was looking to play professional in the EuroLeague and kind of landed there, and then spent his whole career there.
Wow.
Is it Tel Aviv, Mac, the big team over there?
Yeah. He didn't play for Maccabi. He played for Apollo Tel Aviv.
Okay.
And a couple other teams too, but that's kind of
right on.
Going for.
Did your dad play college in the States here?
Yeah, he played at Eastern New Mexico. And he was actually teammates with Dana Altman, who
really
was Peyton Pritchard's coach. So that was my first cool interview that I got.
That's really
helped set that one up.
Very
cool. All right, so now focusing on kind of this year's team. I mean, it seems like pretty much, aside from a couple of Knicks, bumps and bruises here and there, this team has stayed relatively injury-free. I mean, the season has worked out great. KP has fit in perfectly with the team, the city. He's BFFs with Juice, Jaylen Brown. What do you see as the most important kind of factors from this point on to the end of the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, health is number one, just because you lose, knock on wood, you lose one of the core guys, and that's the most dramatic thing that could happen down the stretch here. Like there's not really a lot that I think we're going to learn about this team over the next however many games are left. We'll get a few more close kind of last possession games, which I think would be great practice for them heading into the playoffs, because we have seen that to be a little bit of an Achilles heel. But outside of that, like just staying healtty. That Porzingis was really good last night. I don't think he would have missed 5 games if it was the playoffs, and he said that after the game too. But just making sure that he's healthy, that Tatum, Brown, Hauser makes a recovery from his ankle sprain. Like that's kind of the main things that I'm looking for. We've seen this team is not getting complacent. Like I'm not even like eager to see how do they show up against the Pistons on Friday. Like they're going to show up because they've done it every single night, with the exception of like maybe the home Lakers game and the Hornets game way earlier in the season. Like they've been it's very unusual to see this level of consistency, especially when you're playing inferior opponents with such a lead in the standings. So not too concerned with like the on-court things. I think we're going to see more of the same. So just health, really. So
my next question, leading into the playoffs, we've seen the past few years, kind of one of the challenges I think the Celtics face in the playoffs. It seems to be the teams get really physical with them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the officiating too. They allow a little more. Do you foresee kind of them learning from that experience and being able to clean that up this season?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely been a challenge in the past. I also think they're actually one of the more physical teams now. Like I'm trying to remember. I recently saw someone lost to the Knicks the other night and was saying, like the Knicks and Boston, they're the two teams that everyone knows are really physical. And I was thinking like, that's an improvement from, but I got to find who that quote was. But I think there's an X factor with Porzingis just a little bit, just because we haven't seen him in a deep playoff run. Like we don't exactly know what we're getting. So that's a question. And, we saw it with Jokic, like there are some tough matchups for him when there are guys that are just much, much bigger than him, much stronger than him. And so I could see that being a little bit of a challenge. As far as the Jays go, I'm not really concerned about it. I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both have shown this year that their willingness to drive, especially Jaylen Brown. I mean, he's been so phenomenal, just getting downhill and finishing through contact. And so I'm not overly concerned about it. I also think that they have kind of those release valves in Porzingis that they didn't necessarily have before. They're 99% of the time you have 5 guys on the court that can shoot. I mean, with the exception of Cornette, who actually can shoot, but obviously not doing so in this offense. So I don't think that's going to be a problem this playoffs. But increased physicality is always kind of changes the dynamic. And if anything, the thing that I'm a little bit more nervous about is just that they've been shooting lights out for weeks now. Like, this is a team-wide shooter. I don't know if people are paying attention to the across the board, the shooting splits right now, but they are insane. And so there's a little bit of this feeling of like, is that going to be able to continue? I mean, granted, they're great looks, and that's the key to this Missoula style offense, is that it's not that you have 5, super shooters on the court. Like Tatum and Brown, they're good shooters, but you're getting guys really good looks. Like Drew Holiday is having a career year from 3, the same way that Malcolm Brogdon and Al Horford did last year, because of the types of looks that they're getting. And so it's not like fluky, but there is a feeling of you hope that you can keep that up going into the playoffs. And that's true for everyone. I mean, if any team gets ice cold, they're going to have a difficult chance of winning. But that's the thing that I've kind of been thinking about over the last few weeks. It's
almost like get that cold streak. If you have it, get that out of your system now, and then, save this hotness for them. Do you think Joe will we already know his rotations, shorten up considerably in the postseason. Do you think he's going to change his style of coaching, particularly with, for example, late game situations where we've seen during the regular season, he likes to just let the team play through, like no timeout. We're just going to play through. We're not going to call a set play. Do you foresee him changing that style in the playoffs? When the game comes out to last possession, calling a timeout and having plays set.
I think we might. It's definitely, to me, it's the biggest uncertainty with this team. Like, I feel really confident about the Celtics team. I think Joe is a phenomenal coach. I've learned a ton about basketball just from sitting in his pressers and learning from him. So I think he's really he has full buy-in from this team. We've all seen it. There have been a couple of times this year, more than a couple, where in the last possession, either in a tie game or, you're trailing, we have an ISO, fadeaway falling shot from Jason Tatum. That's just not a great look. He might make it once in a while, but it's not a high percentage shot, especially when you're finishing a game where you've been getting really good shots all night. There's no reason to move away from that. The way that I've been viewing it, and then maybe I'm just an inherent optimist when it comes to covering this team, but I think this has all been good experience. Like there have been numerous losses on that exact play this year. So I have to think that if you're going into the playoffs and you're in a tie game, you're thinking about, well, the last 7 times we didn't call anything, we didn't call a set, and we got this ISO fadeaway look and it didn't go. And so every time it happened during the season, I'm thinking like maybe this is just a good data point for to kind of build off of. That being said, I mean, last year in the playoffs, like I'm thinking about, I think this was game 3 or game 4 in Philadelphia, where Marcus Smart hit a shot that it was after the buzzer, and a big reason for that was because Jason Tatum just took his time getting that play. And he's done that time and again. Like, we know that's a little bit of a weakness for him, that in that moment he takes a little bit too much time. And so I would love to have like the ball in Derek White's hands in those moments more. Even if we have a couple opportunities during the season. And see what that looks like. Like, he's a great pick and roll player. You can still have Tatum out there, and they're going to be doubling him, and they're going to be trying to take him out. You might even get a really good look for Tatum now because, there's not that initial focus on him. So I would love to see it more. I think everybody kind of feels that way. Whether or not that will happen, my guess is probably as good as yours. But I look forward to maybe having 1 or 2 more games down the stretch here. That's a close one. Although we're not seeing anything from the crunch time office right now, but maybe we will in the next few weeks and we'll get another chance here.
How great of an addition has KP been for this team? I know the guys have said that he changes the spacing for everything. Why has KP fit in so well? It seems not just on the floor, but he embraces the fans, just the culture, the atmosphere at the Garden. Like why has this trade just been such a success for the Celtics?
Yeah. So beyond what you said around him being just such a multi-level threat on offense, and he's having like a historic year for efficiency from the post, which I don't think 5 years ago anybody saw that coming for him, based on where his game was at that point. I think he's bought in, and he's bought in. He's not worried about his touches. He's not worried about his points. This is a common theme with this Celtics team, and it's why I think they have a really good chance this year. You have a bunch of guys that are not really worried about proving themselves. And that's not true. We've had some really talented rosters over the last 5-6 years filled with guys that were worried about proving themselves. That's a contributing factor to why they didn't get it done. And it's human nature. You can't fault a 22-year-old for not wanting, for wanting to prove that they're worth a supermax or prove that they're worth being the number 3 draft pick. But now you have Porzingis who's seen it all. He's seen what it's like to be on a playoff team and maybe let his emotions or his ego get the best of him in Dallas. He's seen what it's like to have a really good year on a really bad team, and I'm sure he does not miss that time in DC. But an experience there. And so I think he's bought into doing whatever this team needs, and he's not worried. Even in losses, like there was a loss to Denver at home earlier in the year where he was a little bit iced out of the offense down the stretch. And he said after the game, like, I don't care. I'm not worried about the touches. Whereas I think a lot of guys, in the beginning of their prime are like, yeah, well, good things were happening when I had the ball in my hand. Like we've seen people say that on this group, right? So that's a big part of why I think there's been really good chemistry and camaraderie around this team. And then you have Drew Holiday who's leading by example. He was literally last year. And now we're seeing there are nights where he takes 4 shots the whole game while guarding the other team's best player for 40 minutes. And so it's top down and, it's this whole lineup. But I mean, you couldn't have hoped for more with Porzingis, both offensively and then defensively. I'll be honest, I hadn't watched a ton of Porzingis film like heading into this year. I've been really pleasantly surprised with just how well he moves, how good of a protector he is. Like he really has not been a liability for them. He's been an asset. So just on both ends, he's just plugged in perfectly. I think better than Brad Stevens could have even imagined.
Yeah.
It seems like Porzingis, like you said, I've been blown away by his defense. It really seems to be like the only times that his defense kind of gets exploited is with just the big bulky centers like Embiid,
like a Jokic,
and Jokic, where it seems like their plan is just to muscle up, back him down closer and closer to the rim and get the easy shots. Other than that, I think he's been fantastic.
And I think in the playoffs, we're going to see Al taking those matchups more because during the regular season, they just don't, like I've noticed this for a couple of years now. They don't put Al on Jokic and Embiid during the regular season. They just spare him. And then in the playoffs, I think we're going to see a little bit of a increased load for him, hopefully. So,
well, and Al shuts down Embiid every year. So we know. Do you see Tillman stepping into some of that too?
Absolutely. I mean, I've loved watching Tillman's activity defensively. Like he is just the definition of an honest defender. Like he's not going for pump fakes. He's not going to get the highlight reel chase down block. Something that I think about a lot because I think I was saying earlier about my game. Like I'm really good at blocking shots, but I'm not a great defender. A lot of times that's like, I think about people conflate those two things as if you're a really good defender, you're getting a lot of blocks. A lot of times you're getting blocked because you're out of position. And so Tillman, if you watch him, like he's just in the right place at the right time. He knows how to switch. He's so versatile and he doesn't bite. And so I've had so much fun watching him play defense over these last few weeks. I'm actually going to a community event with him later today. So I'll get a chance to ask him maybe a little bit about what that experience has been like. But I do think he's another weapon that they have in case of those big matchups against guys like Embiid and Jokic. And he has a track record of holding up, as well as you can. Nobody's gonna thrive in a Jokic matchup. Like Anthony
right.
Sure. He's a good asset for them to have, for sure.
Well, one player I know you had a great exclusive interview with, Keita. The first name I always butcher it, but Keita. It seems like with the Tillman trade, his minutes, and injury, have kind of diminished. Do you see him being able to crack the rotation going forward, or is that going to be a challenge for him?
I don't know if he's going to this year. And I don't know if the Celtics consider him a part of their long-term plan. I could see it going either way. Last night, actually, I wasn't at the game, but a Portuguese reporter asked Joe, like, he kind of said, do you like Keita? Like, what do you think about him? And Joe was, I thought, was very gracious in his answer and talked about how Keita actually won us some games this year. Like, people forget that was a while ago, but on that West Coast road trip, when I think Cornet was out for a stretch there, he was the guy backing up the bigs, and he did a really great job. And right now he's not in the rotation. It doesn't look to me that he's going to get a fully guaranteed contract this year, but I'm just speculating. But he has a couple games left still on his two-way. But down the stretch, in the future, I think he showed a lot of promise and a lot of growth this year. Obviously, offensively, he's a great rebounder. He's able to make a lot of things happen. He's just one of those guys that's just like a ball magnet. You just there's like. Yeah, kind of that idea of like energy attracts, energy, and the ball kind of comes towards people like that. So I would love to see him stick around with this group and as kind of in that backup big kind of more project. He's a little bit rawer role. I think right now there's earlier in the year there was this like, oh, is it going to be Luke Cornet or is it going to be Keita as the backup? Right. Luke knows the system. I mean, he is so smart and he's so familiar with all of the schemes that they play. I mean, that's what years of being a part of a team looks like. And so I don't think there's competition anymore really for that spot, but I think the team really likes what they saw out of Keita this year, and I think in the opportunities that he had, he did a really good job.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think, we are season ticket holders, so we end up at a lot of the games, and one of my favorite things to do is always watch the bench. When whether it's the starters on the bench or the bench on the bench, like their reactions to the other players on the team, like their genuine enthusiasm and excitement. It really seems like they love each other and that there really is this like just camaraderie and family atmosphere. And I know that was a word that Keita used to describe being on the Celtics was family. Do you see that when you're talking to the players and when you're, watching the games? Is that something that you, kind of feel is emulated across the board as well?
Absolutely. And I like this stuff, I think, more than the average reporter. Like I really like, I sit on the kind of 9th floor area facing the Celtics bench. So I kind of have like the TV view, but you see everything. And the guys that I sit with always laugh. Like I'm literally constantly watching the bench, like filming, watching, getting reactions. I think that's what you can't see on TV.
Yes.
But this is a team, winning helps. It's always more fun when you're blowing teams out of the water on basketball to know that, that's the case. But I also, what I said earlier about the lack of egos, you have guys that are genuinely rooting for each other. And Brad Stevens put together a team. I think this was a primary goal of his, is to not bring like a maybe really talented player that was going to be a locker room challenge. Like he avoided those characters in putting together this roster over the summer and again at the trade deadline. And he talked about it.
Kyrie.
I think before the trade deadline and then also right after. And he said, we don't want to do subtraction by addition, kind of like we don't want to add someone and then mess with what we have going here. And I think Delano Banton and Lamar Stevens were two great guys as well. And so I was okay with leaving the group as it was because I thought you had guys that were fully bought into the team. And I think the guys that they've added, Tillman and Springer, fully bought in as well. So I mean, I think there's certain friendships that we've all kind of enjoyed watching, like Porzingis and Jaylen Brown. That's they live in the same apartment.
Cookies and cream.
Yeah. And then watching guys like Derek White that everybody, you ask about Derek White, you're going to get like we love him. He's so special. He's so amazing. You ask about Al Horford. It's kind of like, sometimes I want to ask about Al Horford, but I know they're just going to go into like a monologue about how he's the perfect teammate and there's nobody like him. And, so I think there is a lot of love and respect just across the board. And it's been really fun to cover. It would be very different to cover a team that you see. It would be interesting, but it would be a completely different experience.
How amazing of a job has Brad Stevens done assembling this team? The trades he has made, the Derek White trade alone, just
oh my goodness.
But like, I think that was one thing that was frustrating. Danny made, granted, one of the best trades ever with getting, the picks for Tatum and Brown. But Brad, has kind of done, he's been different than Danny in the fact that he pulls the trigger. He goes and gets it. He makes the trades. How great has he been for just the assembling of this roster?
Well, I mean, he's executive of the year. I think there's not a question about it.
Agreed. Agreed.
I'll be honest, this experience has really made me glad that I don't work in a front office, because I don't think I would have made either of those trades. And they obviously both were really good trades. And in part, I feel it sucks to see, but, Rob and Malcolm really have not had healthy years. Neither are Smart. I mean, the 3 guys that they lost, I don't know how many collective minutes they've spent on the court this year, but it's been very few.
Yeah.
And I think that was a factor. I mean, especially with Rob, but I think also with the other 2, there was an increased injury-prone feel there. People talk about Porzingis being injury-prone, but, this was a pretty injury-prone group as well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, he had a vision of assembling he kept the duo of Jalen and Jason that I think is, it would be really hard to give up one of those guys in their prime right now. Like, I don't think any GM would want to do that unless they're getting like just proven superstar. And even then you have to think about other things. But, Wick has talked about this pretty openly. After what happened in the playoffs last year, in which really they struggled through the playoffs, even though they came so close to the finals, like that was a tough playoffs. Like from a viewer standpoint, like we know it was not an easy one. Wick wanted to, he said, we're not bringing back this core. And you're giving someone that instructions, like you're putting Brad in a pretty challenging position, because this is a core that was, a sprained ankle away maybe from the NBA finals again. I think given that directive, he did as well as you could possibly imagine, because he did change the core. I mean, he got rid of Marcus and Rob as 2 guys that had been, homegrown, like really core parts of this team. Brogdon, who was coming off a 6th man of the year, somehow made this team a lot better. I hats off to him. Glad I don't have his job. I look forward to seeing what, every time he makes a move, I'm like, okay, maybe I wouldn't have thought of that, but this is like almost like this is the correct move to make because Brad made it. Like with Xavier Tillman, not on my list. I was really trying to see if I could predict who he was going to get, and it was not someone that I was, was looking at.
And it was like the perfect person.
It's almost like Belichickian, the way everyone predicts, the mock drafts or the trades, and someone out of nowhere just seems to just pop up like, oh, we got this guy. Who's he? We got it. Wikipedia him or Google or YouTube him.
If
the Celtics have another one roster spot open, don't they?
They do.
So have you heard anything? And I mean, just on a personal level, he's been one of my faves from last year. Have you heard anything about Blake Griffin? Is he going to sign with? Is he going to sign with the team? Have the Celtics reached out? Like, is there any chance?
Wouldn't he not be playoff eligible though if he signed now?
He's still eligible, and I get confused about this all the time. But the playoff eligibility thing was about buyouts. So guys,
okay.
Yeah, if you've just not like Isaiah Thomas is playoff eligible.
Okay,
even though he just got signed.
Yes.
Which that would have been fun too, but
I was rooting for Blake or IT.
So here's the latest I know about Blake. The Peyton Pritchard and Derek White went on Pardon My Take a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about how there was really a friendship formed there between him and those guys and the rest of the team. Like everybody talks about him. He's in that beloved category that's just, you ask about him and you get a spiel about how great he is. And so I think they would love to have him. I think he played his role really well last year. Every indication that I've received is that, he is really enjoying his time with his family. I don't have any reason to think that he's been working out and staying in shape to be in the NBA. And so I would be really surprised if last minute he was added. They could leave that spot open. I feel like you're gearing up for a title run. You're probably not going to. They could convert Kata's or one of the other 2 ways to a fully guaranteed. The other 2 are J.D. Davison and Drew Peterson, neither of whom have really gotten, Celtics minutes. They've been mostly in Maine. So I don't know. I mean, it's still possible that they pick up someone else, unsigned guys that could help provide depth in different places. So I think that, Kata has a chance here. Like he's one of the more viable pathways. I would be really shocked if Blake Griffin got the role. And we asked Joe Mazzulla about it after that podcast came out. And he said, I talked a little bit with Blake at the beginning of the offseason, and he said, I'm really focusing on my family. And then I didn't talk to him after that based on, wanting to respect that. And so it sounds to me like the Celtics would have had him back this year had he wanted that. But he's not from here, he's from the West Coast. And I think it was going to be another year of the grind and the toll on his body when he's not really able to play the level I think that he would like to.
Sure.
And so he's probably a no, but it would definitely be a fun news story if he joined the team. I think from a reporter standpoint, I think we'd all really enjoy it.
If IT's 10-day expires and the Suns don't bring him on, do you think there's any chance that the Celtics would ever go there?
There's always a chance. And, so he played in Utah last week, and the Celtics were playing in Utah that night too. So a lot of the reporters that were on that road trip went to the game, as did Missoula and some other people in the Celtics organization. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, maybe he's checking out IT. But I don't think I think that's the kind of move where like you maybe have the chance to change the dynamic a little bit. Like, I don't know if you want like a loud veteran who's a legend in the city, as cool as that is. And that's no knock on him, because I think he's always been a great locker room guy, but it's just like, you kind of don't want to touch anything because everything's working so well. John Corrales, who has one of my favorite Celtics podcasts, he talked about, how he really wants IT to rejoin the team this year, and how he thinks it would actually be a really good veteran voice and like a tough. So I think there's a case to be made there. But I could see him sticking around in Phoenix. They could use someone that they could actually use someone like him, because sometimes they just come out looking flat, and he can provide a little bit of that spark and that, inspiration. And so I hope that he's around there. I hope that he gets a real contract there. Would not mind it at all if Boston picked him up in the case that he doesn't stay in Phoenix.
For sure. I mean, he lit it up in the G League. Few games that he was playing.
Do you think that if the standings stay as they are, if we end up facing Miami in round 1, which is potentially projected at the moment, do you see that being not a problem for the Celtics, but like a disadvantage for the Celtics entering the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, it's a more tough series than facing Indiana or facing the Magic or even facing Cleveland, like teams that have a better record. That's nothing like experience. Like Indiana, people have asked me about like Indiana, and is Indiana a real threat? And I think they've had, their moments this year. But at the end of the day, like if you're seeing your first postseason appearance versus a team like Miami that's been there many times, it's going to be tougher, and they're also really physical, and so your chances of injury are a little bit higher. Not saying that they're a dirty team, but just like those are all factors to consider as well. So I do think in a way it's a matchup you probably want to avoid. That being said, there's a little bit of a similarity to me with 2022 and facing the Nets in the first round. And I actually think that was one of the best things that happened to Boston that year, and why they were able to almost win it all is because they faced a team that was maybe like people were scared to face, and they swept them, right? And so I think that would do a lot for their confidence in setting the tone, rather than playing a team like the Hawks in the first round, which maybe you're like, okay, this first round is going to be a breeze. You take your foot off the gas. I don't think the Celtics team is like that anymore, but I could see there being an advantage to playing Miami as well. But I'll be honest, I still think Miami is a really difficult matchup, and I would not overlook them even in the first round, even this year, despite how there's been obviously a huge disparity between how the teams have performed.
Couldn't agree more. I don't care where Miami is in the standings.
Yeah,
they scare me. They're just because they've, Jimmy Buckets is dangerous. Their physicality, Spoelstra, they make me nervous. I don't care what anyone says.
Especially is the X factor.
That's funny that you mentioned that Brooklyn series. It was so karma worked out so well that year, because remember how all the teams are just tanking just to avoid that spot, and then the Celtics got it and sweep. That was great. Before I let you go, talk. Who have been some of your favorite players to kind of get to know behind the scenes, and what's something that you've learned about maybe one of the players that kind of surprised you, and just kind of what's it been like to kind of get to know the players a little bit on a more personal level behind the scenes.
Yeah. Derek White's been really nice to cover, and I'm sure that doesn't surprise anyone, but I think he's just like such a normal person. Like he genuinely is just a regular person who's really good at basketball and is really kind to everyone. He was one of the first people I did like a one-on-one interview with, and like I was nervous, but he seemed nervous too. I think he's just like nervous, being recorded and being in front of camera and things like that. So he's been really nice to cover. Jaylen Brown, I haven't done like much one-on-one with him, but as far as just like him in the post-game pressers, he just sits up there and he gives really thoughtful responses, and he's super authentic. The challenge I think in covering NBA players is that they're all very PR trained, and they know that if they say one thing that's like a little bit more controversial, then it's going to be a soundbite and it's going to be a whole storyline. So they want to avoid that. And a lot of times you end up getting really canned answers, the same things over and over and over again. And Jaylen Brown sits up there and just says what he's thinking. And so, he's been really fun to cover as well. And then I really enjoy the kind of Stay Ready group. Some of the guys that get a little bit less attention, I think in part because like they're not as burnt out by talking to the media and dealing with the spotlight and the controversy, but I really enjoyed covering Lamar Stevens. I know he's not on the team anymore, but he was actually the first player I interviewed one-on-one, and he was just a really thoughtful guy that just was so clearly about the team, and it's been fun to see the success he's having in Memphis. Jaden Springer, I met him shortly after the trade. I think he's another really great guy. So I'm trying to think, to answer your question about what surprised me, I guess just the fact that they're all normal people. Like the first time I was sitting in the press room and Jason Tatum walked in, I was like, this is a little surreal. Like I've only ever seen him.
Yeah.
And then the more you're around, you realize that it's like they're just, we're doing our job, we're writing and talking, and they're doing their job. They're playing basketball at a very high level. It's actually not like as much different as maybe it feels like when you're sitting at home watching them on TV and they're, obviously seen in kind of this grand level. So maybe just that, but everybody's been really nice. And I would say maybe a better answer is Missoula, because he did seem very defensive last year. I was a little bit nervous for him this year. Just like, I don't want to ask the wrong question. And he does.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes he gets upset. Sometimes, there's a little bit of that friction. I haven't really had much with him, but I know some of the other guys in the beat have. But
Gary Washburn.
yeah, he's honestly like, I think he's really fair, and I think he's really thoughtful. And he's not just trying to like get you. Like I think he's actually, if you ask a good question, like he'll take his time and answer it. And so he's been great to cover. I'm very grateful to have had him as the first coach that I've covered in the league.
Yeah, it's I've noticed he's just as intense after the game in the press room, talking to people as he is on the sidelines. It's impressive. It's very impressive.
He's very methodical, and there's rhyme and reason behind everything he says and does.
Absolutely.
In a way that like as we've gotten, I think, even to watch him as an audience over the last 2 years, I think people that are paying attention are realizing more and more like who he is, and that he's not just this hard shell, but that there's like quirks and humor and other things there that weren't as apparent last year when he was thrown into an impossible situation. So
absolutely.
Well, there's also the threat that he is like a black belt in BJJ, so you also don't want to piss him off too much. So, but no, jokingly aside, last question for you: did you have a chance to see the broadcast on last night? The all female. What'd you think? I mean, we were at the game, but I caught some of the bits and pieces of it.
Yeah,
they to me seemed like they killed it. What were your impressions of the broadcast?
Yeah, I was gonna say I normally I miss not being at TD Garden when I can, and actually last night I was really glad to be home so I could watch the game with the broadcast. I thought that they were exceptional. I would say I'm a little bit of a broadcast connoisseur. Like I watch a lot of League Pass, and I have certain local broadcasts that I just can't stand, and certain that I love. So I pay a lot of attention to the broadcast, probably more than is necessary. And I was like hopeful that they would be good, especially because there is so much scrutiny, and I know that it's hard being a woman in this space, and they're not, this is the first time they're assembling this group together. You don't have any chemistry or practice. I thought they were exceptional. I thought Abby, is obviously super talented and super plugged in, but I thought she was incredible. But the whole, from top to bottom, I thought it was a great broadcast crew. I was super I kind of was catching myself being like, this is actually I'm learning a lot. I'm like, I'm not getting distracted. Like I thought they nailed it as far as balancing all the different elements you want to balance when you're, doing play-by-play, doing analysis. So yeah, huge shout out to them. I hope that it's something that happens more than once a year, because I think they showed, from what I've seen, people seem to have really enjoyed the broadcast as well. So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, it was very.
They may come calling to you too, so you might want to be on that Stay Ready crew and the broadcast team.
I can be a part of the Stay Ready crew.
Yeah,
it was very exciting to hear that they were doing that, and I think I agree. Like I hope they do it more than just once, during International Women's Month. I hope that they add that as a regular, kind of periodic group of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Noah, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, to meet you. And you're killing it in the on the Celtics blog. I love your work. Thank you so much for joining the show. And I hope maybe we can check back before playoff time and do a preview. Awesome.
Yeah, before the Suns and before the Connecticut Suns over the summer too.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to that as well.
I want to give that some love. Actually, talk about that gig.
So I'm just getting started. I haven't been down there yet, and really excited to. I think it's a really exciting team. They have one of the best players in the league in Alyssa Thomas, and I'm glad to be able to continue coverage of the Northeastern professional basketball teams. I think that this is a team that they have They were actually pretty close last year. They were just a couple of games away from being in the finals. And I think that they'll be in the mix again this year. And so that gig just gives me an opportunity to continue to write into the summer. I'll still be covering the Celtics for, off-season things that happen. But I think I would have really missed not being at live games and closely covering a team. So being able to juggle that in the offseason, I really look forward to it. And the Next Hoops is a really awesome newsroom. If you're not familiar with it, they're covering literally everything for women's basketball. They have reporters on the ground for all the March Madness games, all the pro teams. So I don't think there's anywhere else like that that's covering women's basketball with so much detail. It's been really impressive. Just since I joined the Slack channel and everything, I'm like, there's dozens and dozens of reporters all over this beat. So really cool stuff. Glad that I get to be a part of it. And it was cool last night to see a little bit of a crossover. I haven't been around yet, so I don't know a lot of the people that were, I don't know them on a personal level, but it made me even more excited for the gig and the opportunity.
That actually leads me to one last question. Will Boston ever get a WNBA team? I mean, it seems but I mean, it seems like it makes so much sense because I mean, this is one of the most historic franchises.
No, I've
great
said it
basketball city. To have a team here in Boston play, on the parquet, like, a lot of the other major cities have them. Like,
yeah.
Do you know, like, why doesn't Boston have a team? Do you see that ever potentially happening?
I mean, the truth is I have no idea, but I agree with you completely. And also, like, I'm not looking forward to commuting to Mohegan Sun and to go to the games. And so I would love for them to play in TD Garden. A part of me was like, maybe this is like somewhat of a trial run, like this having them, because this summer they're going to be playing their first ever WNBA game in Boston.
Oh, really?
I would say Celtics fans show up, make it. There is room for a team here. I don't actually know if there's like what the logic is behind there. Maybe if I do know, I'll be happy to report back. But it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, it's just hard to get a huge fan base for a team that's in a casino in Connecticut, not really close to a major city, versus one of the best sports. I mean, the best sports city in America. So to me, it makes all the sense in the world. I hope that if it's not the Connecticut Sun, Boston does get a team in the near future. But yeah, I think maybe there's some of the things that we're seeing right now, like the increased collaboration between Connecticut Sun and Boston, are good signs in some way, but I don't actually know what the broader implications are. I'm very hopeful though.
And it feels like the right time with like the Caitlin Clark, I don't want to say phenomenon. She's amazingly talented, but with the amount of like stardom and, media that she brings, it's like the right time potentially to make that move because fans are interested.
Absolutely.
And I'll say this, it seems like the women's game is perhaps at the height that it, more as popular as it's ever been. Because someone, I think it was Paul Pierce had mentioned, or Garnett asked him, can you name 5 college players in the men's, which he couldn't, but women's, he knew 5 players right off the bat. So, I mean, that should tell you where the state of the women's game is. Noah, thank you so much again. It was such a pleasure to have you on and to talk to you. And I look forward to checking back in with you later in the season.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to being back.
We just came straight out the gutter. We want everything or nothing. We just coming for your spot on the top, and we want everything above it.